So when we bring our breath into the equation, that's probably the most transformational part of it. Even like if you think you can do this now if you want, like make a closed fist and squeeze it. Now, what's happening to your breath?
Stopping.
Yeah, and I can see your facial muscles are like they're going.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit scared now.
Yeah. Full blown boxing section now, like two of us flaking the shit out of each other.
Right. But try to breathe. Now just breathe into that. And like, now what does your hand want to do? It's when you start breathing.
Mine is softening.
Yeah, so it's beginning to open. It's beginning to open up and let go.
Yeah.
Like we can do that with any kind of tension or tightness in our body.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with a guest, someone who we've spent a lot of time together over the last several months. And is this possibly the first time you're sharing a long form bit of your backstory, Ciaran? What got you into the world of Oga Yoga? What got you into mindfulness? Or again, is that something that is you're just expanding on? Because we've been building out your social strategy recently, and I'm trying to get you to do a podcast so you can tell all your stories and connect all the people you've been connected with. But is this the first time you've kind of gone in long form?
I've done an interview with Dahi O'Shea, Fado, maybe 10 years ago, but nothing really since then.
Amazing. Mate, we are going to go through a lot of topics in today's podcast. We've been working together for the past nearly 6 months when it comes to the business mentorship and getting Oga Yoga out there, getting mindfulness out there, getting the elements that make you so great as an executioner when it comes to supporting people with their body composition, with their mindfulness, with their mental health, etc. And we're going to unpack all that as we go through, because you say things on some of our chats when we're meeting up for a mentorship, and I'm like, okay, I need to sit with that. I need to reflect on that. We need to create content on this because it hits me in real time, because it's a busy world. Lots of us have lots of different stresses, and your story is so relatable, particularly for those that are Irish, for those that are male, connects with females too, of course, because of the way that you were brought up, the world that you're in, and the reasons that you got into yoga and mindfulness because of, growing up in Dublin, having that anxiety issue, potentially smoking, drinking cultures, looking for alternatives to deal with mental health. And now you're the positioned expert in this space helping other people. Can you talk us a little bit about what got you into mindfulness, what got you into yoga? Because you are now someone that people go to either Oga Yoga when it comes to younger individuals, but all the way up to working with people one-to-one, where they're able to work on their mindfulness, work on their body movement patterns, so they're able to connect the mind-body. Talk to us a little bit about what got you into the space initially, because it's, again, you've been doing this for a long time now, but just paint us that picture as a jumping off point.
Well, it was probably about 25 years ago. I was getting injured playing Gaelic football, and I was probably burning the candle on both ends, where I was playing very competitive, training with the senior team, still only about 17, 18, and then I was probably going drinking and smoking straight after training and, not doing the recovery. So I kind of end up developing, like, over the years, a lot of athletic groin pain was probably where I probably fell short. So yoga and Pilates were recommended to me, and I'd bounce in and out. When I was able to play again, I kind of forgot about it. But then it was actually in 2010 here in Galway, the Shamra Yoga, where I start going to more regular classes, and then at the end of one of the classes, we done a Shavasana, where you lie down. Mm-hmm. I remember kind of after going, oh, that was something else. And I think a lot of yoga teachers, they talk about that moment where they kind of realize that it's more than just a physical practice that you should be doing, that it's kind of something a bit more special, like a gift that you can kind of come back to. I really from that moment, I knew I was hooked, or it was something that I wasn't just going to do for recovery, that it was something deeper, something that was kind of related to my own well-being.
With that, you've had the benefit of it connecting in lots of different areas of life when it comes to business, when it comes to family, when it comes to GA, etc. Talk us through when you decided to make this a career, because that journey from I'm getting personal benefit from yoga and the mindfulness element and connecting those two things to I'm actually going to use this message to serve others, whether it is in the online space now, whether it's at Electric Picnic where you're doing, a yoga classes, Irish-based yoga, promoting the Irish language, whether it is in schools with younger children for the Oga Yoga, writing the books, the children's books that are all about the yoga poses, all linked in the description that people can check out off the back of it. When and what point did you go from this is benefiting me to I actually need to make a career out of this?
Yeah, well, initially I never intended to become a yoga teacher. I was kind of going to become an Irish language teacher as a backup to whatever else I wanted to do. So I had a master's in language planning and a degree in the Irish language. So my interest was actually in developing the Irish language. But then I went off to India. I booked like a 3-month trip to Rishikesh, where the Beatles were. That was very transformational. When I came back, it was like almost a reverse culture shock, kind of looking at how people were running around and stressed and just how gaunt everyone looked. Kind of an eye-opener for me. I knew I wanted to go back. I ended up going back to India 3 more times. I went and done the HDIP in Trinity College, and throughout that year, people started hearing that I had qualified. Now, a lot of my mates who I grew up with thought this was absolutely hilarious. The idea of me running a yoga class. I got invited into a primary school, and then I got into a secondary school. And then at the end of the year, when I finished the HDIP, I got a job with Closh Lurgan out in Indravan there beside TG Carr. And I was basically teaching Irish through yoga in the mornings and then teaching yoga through Irish in the afternoons. So I done that for 3 full summers. Got to try lots of different things, where you're just thrown in, you're given a group of 25 kids, 4 classes in a row. So I got to try different styles and different ways of teaching Irish and yoga and what worked and what didn't work. But really that first summer with Closh Lurgan in September, the owner, Michael O'Feil, he's quite an innovator and entrepreneur himself. Like he goes, just go with the yoga, don't mind the teaching, just develop Oga Yoga. Really, since then now, as I was looking back and said, it's over about 50,000 students, teenagers, adults that have actually done workshops and courses with us, and nearly that's 99% Oscoilge.
It's incredible what you're doing. And again, we've been doing a combination of trying to lean into this Irish promotional language because it's so uniquely you and such a passion topic to you, and also getting the mindfulness and yoga element out there. And then we were able to combine the two. That's obviously the sweet spot. Why did your friends think it was so crazy? Talk to us a little bit about, because I only know the new Ciaran, the Ciaran who is calm, the Ciaran who has the mindfulness practices, the Ciaran who has the children's books for yoga, who goes into the schools, who works with people online, the calm, collected Ciaran. Talk to us about why your friends initially thought it was crazy, because I've never met the old version of you. So
Frank the Tank.
Yeah, Frank the Tank. Talk to us through the Frank the Tank years of Ciaran, and just because I think that's what's so connecting, because we see the end result, which is the success story, but I have a kind of a brief idea on your background, stuff that hasn't always been put out publicly, that suffering from anxiety, drinking too much, smoking too much, growing up in relatively rough areas where there's peer pressure to be in other things that isn't GA, that isn't sport, that isn't yoga, that isn't mindfulness. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think the origin story from Frank the Tank to Ciaran the mindfulness master is a very interesting one.
Yeah, like a lot of, Irish probably society back the late 90s, people were drinking very young. So we were 12, 13, getting cans and chipping in, pretending to can I have money for a football, and we chipping in to buy smokes, that kind of way. So we, fairly young age, we were kind of doing that. But I always had the Gaelic football in the background. I always had a very supportive family. But I suppose over time I became more reliant on them, and then when the teenage years, they can be quite challenging. We mightn't have the skill sets, our brains are still developing, and the habit was actually drinking and smoking and using that as a means of maybe avoidance, and that kind of gradually, by the time I was 15, I actually got thrown out of school on my 15th birthday. So that was hard,
Yeah, take a minute. That's because what I think, and I know you're getting emotional from this, but it's what's so inspiring for people, because I can see your pull to primary schools, to secondary schools, on top of helping adults, because it's so close to you, to your story, to your origin. And something I've said a lot on the podcast is your mess becoming your message. And when you think about how proud you should be for where you are now to where you were then, but that story, that part of your life is what got you to here. It's what got you the last 5 years, the last 10 years, and getting the degrees, going through the masters in mindfulness, giving back to people. So that's why I think it's so important. So whatever you're comfortable sharing, just because sometimes it's easy for us to look back on our difficult times in the past, and either have shame, have guilt, have anger, have all these potentially unsupportive emotions, when in reality, our story just is. It's part of what got us to where we are now. And it's, the great line I heard recently from one of my mentors was, your memory minus the emotional energy equals wisdom. And you think about the memory, the timeline, you remove the emotional reactivity to the memory, and then you've got your wisdom, which is where a lot of us try and get to. So without going too much into it, talk us through the turning points. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, sport, GA was a little bit of the male mentors particularly coming in, because sometimes it needs to be people outside of our immediate family. Talk us through where the turning point started to come.
Well, I think having the GAA as a means of getting maybe out of the state, and kind of maybe, where I probably, through maybe what people had projected on me, and maybe how I accepted certain narratives, that I was probably a bit of a bowsy, or I was a troublemaker. But when I was on the field playing Gaelic football, I was a leader. I was the person who, pushed it over the line, or done that extra run, turned over the ball, or got the winning score. Like, that kind of really helped me maybe create a different narrative about myself. But I probably wasn't, I don't know if I was supported enough to develop that character, or maybe I wasn't ready to turn towards it fully. Like, I went back into education, into youth reach. That was kind of maybe, it was a more black and white there, where like, okay, this is really not the way I want my future to pan out. Through the efforts of my parents, they managed to get me back into a Gael class up in Tala. I done me leaving cert there, and ended up getting enough points to go study Irish in Trinity. Yeah, and I didn't know what I wanted, really. I didn't really have much trajectory. Like, a lot of my friends were doing apprenticeships. I wasn't really interested in mechanics or being an electrician. So I think I always had, because I was brought up bilingually at home, I always had, and I was educated mostly in Irish as well, so I always had that love of Irish language and culture, and I was kind of seeing that as something, that a path that would maybe set me apart, or something I could follow and not know which way it would go, but I'd be happy to kind of to engage with it and go with it.
That makes so much sense. It's following that path of curiosity and path of interest. The thing that I've said, it's in the new business book, but it's on the business podcast a lot, about like, find what you find easy that other people find difficult. And I think the Irish language particularly is one of those things, in terms of being fluent in another language, is something that takes years for potentially somebody in their adult age range to try and get, versus having been raised bilingually and having these opportunities present themselves, i.e. you do a lot of stuff with TG Car, you do a lot of stuff with RTE as well, but coming through that Oga Yoga lens. But veering out of that, I want to touch a little bit on the using either yoga, mindfulness, or a combination of both to deal with anxiety, because something I've struggled with, and actually one of the things that unintentionally led me into yoga was physical. I went into yoga initially because my body was really tight. As I get older, doing lots of training, I would get stiff and rigid, and yoga was the vehicle to potentially perform better physically. But what I started to get from it was the mental health benefits, the mindfulness elements. I'd never heard of Shavasana. I would have thought it was something you got in an Indian restaurant. Like, I never heard of that until I went to yoga. And then you get this intense feeling of calm sometimes at the end of those practices, and that has a positive impact on your stress, a positive impact on your ability to stop the stimulus and response. Like that famous Viktor Frankl line, that in between every stimulus and response, you have a moment, and you catch that moment, and you either respond or react. And you want to respond so you can come at it from a calm place, a peaceful place, versus reactivity, where you figuratively break the glass and then it's broken into 1,000 pieces, and then you have to say sorry to somebody because you said something you didn't mean to. How do you, either using yourself or clients or a combination, use yoga alongside mindfulness and put them into a percentage split in terms of what you find most effective for you, or what you tend to find most effective for people you work with, when it comes to using anxiety or using those tools and modalities to deal with anxiety versus tobacco, smoking, alcohol, TV, phone, distractions, etc. Talk us through that a little bit, because this is a very strong position for you in terms of how you support people.
Well, I think maybe the best way to introduce that, the idea that there's a technical term for it that I love, the discrepancy monitor. Okay, so we're constantly living in a state of, as one of my mindfulness teachers called it, not enough milk in our tea. So there's a gap there between how things are and how we want them to be. And that can be our default way of living moment to moment when we're not, let's say, like we're not occupied with tasks or doing things, or we can kind of come back to that default of just not lacking something or either resisting something. And that, as I said, that can be that we can live constantly, that can be so overwhelming. But once we begin to kind of shine a spotlight on it, it kind of loses its power. So through yoga and mindfulness, we can kind of become a bit more embodied, and we can kind of come out of that doing, chasing mode into a being more experiential mode. And being able to maybe bounce between those two modes, it's obviously beneficial. But a lot of us never come out of that doing mode, that like a sympathetic nervous system where we're go, 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 go. And we never really switch off. And then I think when we come into that being mode, we can go a bit deeper, and to kind of, you know, there's a kind of there's more happiness and peacefulness as an underlying feeling toned down. So even this morning, like, and I think I can access that more often. So this morning when I was driving to Galway, coming through East Galway, there was a bit of a river there to be seen, and then there was like mist, and then the sun was shining, and I was kind of going, and the moon was still half full there, and I was like, oh, this is like so nice. And I was having me coffee on the road, and that kind of deeper sense of everything being okay and all, like that's, I think, what yoga initially provided, and then mindfulness really built on that.
Something that we've talked about privately is developing the ability to pay attention to the signs in your body and how it can help deal with difficulties. When somebody is looking to adopt a yoga practice or a mindfulness practice or a combination, particularly if they're working with you because you come at it from a combination heavily and you lean more towards, right, they need the yoga and the physical movement more, or this person needs the mindfulness element more, or 50-50 depending on the individual. What or how do you find, in terms of length, it takes people to connect with their bodies? And again, this is a bit of a Pandora's box of a question because it depends on the starting point. But if you wanted to develop if you wanted to develop the ability to pay attention to the signs in your body, when do you normally start to see that transition? Is it in the first practice? Is it after a few days, after a few weeks? Is it years of practice where it starts to become automatic, where you're pulling in, you know, and seeing on a drive the way the moon is, the way the mist is, having the coffee, sitting with those moments? What does that look like? Because something that I've seen, and this is potentially a modern society issue, but again, I don't want to speak out of turn in an area that I'm not massively schooled in, but a lot of people are disconnected from their bodies. They're very in their minds, hence the anxiety epidemic and people struggling with mental health. That's a disconnection from body. For those who want to get more in tune with the hidden language of the body, how they feel, what and when do you normally see that positive benefit start to manifest itself in the physical world when you're working with people, or even in your own example, when you're incorporating mindfulness and yoga regularly?
Well, if you imagine like a pond being stirred up, and like, you know, the water, the mud rises up and everything's a bit muddy, and it's hard to, like, so our emotions are a bit like that. It's like a mishmash of sensations, thoughts and feelings, and it's kind of hard to decipher what's going on exactly. But when we kind of give ourselves enough time, that water can settle, and then that clarity comes. But mindfulness is like a muscle. And it's like going to the gym. So you select the weight and you create that, you know, resistance. So when we're kind of sitting maybe doing meditation, or you're in a yoga pose and your mind is kind of quite active, that resistance of, oh, I want it to be different, or this is hard, or your mind it's just really challenging. That is the work. That's what's going to make the muscle bigger. It can probably help as well to explain what mindfulness is. So a lot of people, there are misconceptions about what exactly is mindfulness. So first of all, Jon Kabat-Zinn, the father of modern day mindfulness, he coined the term mindfulness, and it was a translation from Sati. And he basically said that was a bad translation, that he'd call it bodyfulness now. So is your mind full? Is it empty? What are you doing with your mind? So people say, I'm just trying to stop the thinking. That's probably the biggest one. Really, he said the word bodyfulness. So we're bringing our attention out of the mind and into the sensing body. So how do I, when I'm sitting here, how do I feel in my shoulders, my arms, my legs? How is my breathing in this moment? Am I holding my breath? Is it tight? Am I holding tension in my facial muscles? And I remember my wife, she used to work in hospice as an OT. And when we met initially, she was doing a meditation with me and saying, okay, Randa, relax your face. And I was going, oh, my face is relaxed. And like, she was going, no, it's not. So I had carried like years of, I was probably angry, like, and anger can be healthy, like it set boundaries. But like, I think when you you hold on to it, like, so even like if you look at the animal kingdom, like I always think of the ducks in Stephen's Green Park in Dublin, they have a little bit of a tussle and they kind of shake it out and they let go of it and they move on. But we carry that around with us, like, and that can stay with us for years. And I remember when the first time I went to India, even though I'd been practicing yoga in Ireland, my body was so tight, and it gradually started opening up. And I think I let go those first 3 months over there. Like I let go of a lot of that emotional baggage that I was carrying around. But to answer your question, like how long does it take to become more embodied? Like it can change day by day, and emotions can be stirred up, and it's going to be more challenging. But I think that the practice of turning towards our difficulties rather than avoiding them, it is skillful at times to turn away from these difficulties, but a lot of the times it is the wiser option to turn towards them. And with mindfulness and yoga, especially mindfulness, you build up that ability through the initial few weeks of practice, and then you're more capable of turning towards that difficulty and being able to deal with or meet it skillfully and not push it away. So I like to think of the film The Shawshank Redemption.
One of my favourites.
It was a great film. He eventually, to get out, he had to crawl through the tunnel of shit, and he comes out and he's newborn man and he's profound insights or whatever. And like that, in a way, that turning towards difficulty and experiencing it, going, okay, well, where do I feel that now? Like, so it might be like a feeling of being someone like digging out part of your stomach or like tightness in your chest. And when we kind of shine that spotlight of awareness on it, like it kind of dissolves a bit quicker, and that's you might go, okay, that's a tactic of just pushing it away, but meeting it and being curious to it and doing that with a friendly and gentle curiosity. That's really what mindfulness is about.
What I love about the connection between mindfulness and yoga, because they're something that before I got into the practice of either, I thought they were two separate things, and I didn't realize that they, like health and fitness overlap. There's a point at which they become different things, but there's quite a nice overlap at one point. And mindfulness and yoga can be the same. Like I've done yoga poses and yoga practices where it will stir up all these weird emotions where you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, where is that coming from? Like, and it feels like it's something that's buried deep down. And I had one of my friends, she's a yoga teacher as well, and she was telling me when she went to India, there was 2 poses that she just could flat out not do. She had a history of some abuse in her life, and she was like, can't do the poses. She was like, I spent 6 months just trying to get into the basic position for this pose because it would just stir up an emotion. And that alone shows you this connection between the emotions, what's going on in your body, using yoga to physically move it and shift it, because if it's stuck, it becomes like stagnant water, and then it starts to reek, and it's, causing havoc, and it's reaping stuff on your subconscious that you're not even aware of, and then your pattern and conditions get reinforced, and then you're showing up in a relationship or a job, or the way you eat food, or you're numbing out, and it's all happening at a subconscious level. And that famous Carl Jung quote that until you make the subconscious conscious, it'll run your life and you'll call it fate. Yoga and mindfulness can help bring awareness to this. I want to use an example of yours. This will disconnect with some and be a full connection for others. You've used this, and you did a social media reel on this on one of the games. I think it was with your club. I don't think it was with the Dublin Masters. I think it was with your club, if I'm not mistaken, about using self-regulation in real time. Now, for those that don't play GA or sport, I think this works just as well for a date, just as well for an interview, just as well before you go into your boss to ask for a raise or a salary increase, etc. Talk us through a little bit on that game at halftime. where everything was really ramped up and you thought and felt, I actually just need to calm down, and you went out, performed amazing in the second half because you were able to self-regulate? Talk us through that story, and for those that are listening, they can substitute their chosen goal here, because I think although it's a GAA and a Gaelic football example, it crosses over.
Well, yeah, so the first half I think we're coming in at halftime about 2 points down, and it was against like a kind of a local rival club, and there was a lot of tension, like, and I was like, everybody was agitated. We were probably feeling we were underperforming. The ref was probably, the typical making decisions either way, that kind of both sides are getting frustrated. And like, to be honest, I was like, if someone had just tackled me the wrong way, or I was ready for a scrap, like kind of like, so, but that's part of like, sports, so I was agitated, and we came in, and, the managers were probably rightly so kind of angry, and I remember kind of going, okay, I'm going, like, I need to step back from this. And so I kind of pretended I was a little bit injured in my back. I lay down on the ground. I started.
One of the beauties of being in our 30s and 40s, where it's like, oh yeah, just go over there, do your thing.
Fella, yeah. So I just started like kind of doing some gentle reclined yoga poses. So basically on my back, like, and but really what I was doing, I was just connecting with my breath, and just not trying to change anything really, not trying to push away. But I knew, like, for me, like, having someone trying to inspire and pump me up at that stage, that wasn't what I needed. I needed to kind of go, okay, I need to regulate myself. And that self-regulation, like, and learning how we can do that at the right time. Like, it's probably where, when I was younger, like, I would just react, like, I'd lash out, like, no bother, like, where that being, having the skill set to skillfully avoid unnecessary confrontation it's been really helpful for me in my being an adult or a man-child, as I am.
Which we all are.
And so anyway, my heart, I settled my heart rate. I kind of came back out on the pitch, and when you said it, I was amazing in the second half. They were my words, really.
they were your words, yeah. No, I'm joking. He didn't say that, but I know you performed considerably better.
The stats don't right. And I got about 6 or 7 turnovers in the first few minutes. Now, we had the wind for the second half as well, so it might have helped. But like, I was just in the right time, the right place, right time. I was getting the hand in, and I was like hunting down to turnovers. And me as a footballer, I always played midfield, so it's lovely to get a score. But turning over possession is like, I get a great buzz off that. Yeah, 6 or 7, maybe even more. I don't know. I have to follow them stats up. We still lost the game. I know I have to add, but.
I wasn't going to say that. I was going to let that slide completely.
But we really, as a team, it really got us back into the game. It got my head in the game.
With the regulation that you use there, and just kind of focusing in on your breath and learning to connect to your body. And the reason I wanted to use that example is because it's a tool that you develop, that connect with your breath, calm yourself down. What do I need in this moment? Something that I had a bit of a misconception around, you might have been the same, so feel free to add if you did, was I was a pump yourself up kind of guy. Pump yourself up before a game, pump yourself up before a race, pump yourself up before an event. But then when I got into marathons, ultramarathons, endurance, you can't do that. It's way too fast in terms of burning out. And then you end up hitting a wall, you end up hitting multiple walls. So I ended up in my brain switching from what I thought was like petrol or diesel to hybrid or electric, just slow, steady. And that's calming your nervous system, calming down and regulating before these things that potentially are going to take longer than 30 seconds. When you're doing appearances, and you do a lot of stuff on TV, Electric Picnic, events, schools, now podcasts, and all these areas where it can be nerve-wracking, particularly I would imagine some of the bigger TV appearances you've done. So feel free to use an example if any come to mind, the ones that you've done talks in, the ones with schools, etc. With the self-regulation, is that process that you use for GA and sport the same? Or, you might have to even go back to your early days, because they're a lot of your new normal now. You do so much of this promotion now that you're probably used to it. But in the early days when you would feel that nerve, did you do the same breathing, checking in with your body scan? What did that process look like, and how close is it to the GA tool, so that we can unpack for people listening the different modalities or approaches they can take, so that they're not going into that date and they're like sweating and worried what they're going to say something silly, or they're not going to that meeting or that boss conversation with an increased raise where they're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious, I can't even get my words out. Or if it's sport, a race, a marathon, a high rocks, a GA game, hurling, soccer, rugby, what's that process? And is there a difference between what you do when it's something physical like sport versus something that's even more mental based like a conversation? What does your personal process look like for that?
When I was younger, I used to think anger, I played better when I was angry, and I'd play on the line, like, you know, just one more tackle and you're off sort of thing. And I'd listen to rebel music or Damien Dempsey beforehand, and I'd be like, you know, thinking of the atrocities of British rule in Ireland.
Putting it right into every tackle with this fella who lives down the road from you.
Poor fella. But over the years, I think what really helped me more in Gaelic football anyway was having a little mantra of, okay, the next ball. So that was keeping me very much grounded in the present moment. So regardless of, and what I think I got good at, kind of, if I made a mistake, it wouldn't really sit with me for long. Even if somebody was effing me for kicking it wrong or like over the line or whatever, like I would still let go, all right, that's that ball, and next ball. And that always kept me present. It kept me tuned in. So I still probably have the habit, if I give a good ball, I kind of like stand and admire myself for it. And my man has gone up the pitch. So being able to kind of keep present, and so it's that mindfulness muscle, but it's like staying present in the game. So if you're drifting off and getting distracted, like that's what I'd say to a lot of the younger lads as well, like, you know, that helps to stay present. Next ball. Can
I ask about something on that then? Because I think this is very specific for sport. But also for people approaching nutrition, people approaching posting on social media for business, etc., is kind of that reset mindset. So next ball means that you need to be able to let go of the last one. I have to put a real life situation into this because I think your process will be different to mine, which will be different to people listening. And I think it'll be value picking apart what you do. How do you let go of the last one, particularly if it was bad or good? On the extremes, I find, like, if we use football as an example, you gave a great ball, great turnover. It's easy to get, you know, too high on the highs. And the same is, you know, you got turned over, you kicked a wide. It's easy to get too low on the lows. And that goes for, you know, a training session, nutrition, so many ways in which that mindset and approach applies. How did you let go of the extreme? Something I learned when I was doing ultra marathons was they don't get too high on the highs, don't get too low on the lows. It was so true. Particularly when you're doing something like a 100 miler I did in Vegas in 2020. Like, they were highs. You're like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I'm at mile 50 and I feel great. I can do this 3 more times. And then I'm at mile 70 or even mile 25 and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so far from the end. I actually think my body's just going to stop now. So it's about not getting too high on the highs, too low on the lows, but this applies for so many things. How does that look like for you so that you're able to focus on the next ball, metaphorically or physically, if it's the case of Gaelic football?
Well, you know what I'm saying, this too shall pass. Like, so I mean, obviously those, they're there by acknowledging them. I think it's okay, yeah, that was a nice ball, but like it's being able to redirect your focus. So actually that word sati I used, that John Kabat-Zinn used, the original word for mindfulness, he translated, like, initially how I learned that word was something that was scattered. And it's the process, mindfulness is the process of kind of bringing that together, back together. So I kind of just think of a pane of glass or a mirror that's kind of shattered. But when you bring it back together, it becomes whole again. So it's a bit more of a laser-like focus. So when we're doing yoga, if you're doing a yoga pose, let's say you might be standing in a warrior pose, and your teacher will probably guide you to bring your awareness into the soles of your feet, the alignment of your knee, your arms are outstretched, so you might be feeling the sensations in your shoulders, and you're looking at your fingertips and you're using your breath. So you're very present, and your mind is going to wander. Every few seconds, it will you'll go past to the future. It will start judging, it will create stories, it will just create a whole array of possibilities, and being able to go, oh, there's my mind wandering off again, and redirecting it. And that's a continuous process, and that's what you're doing if you're in a sitting meditation. You're focusing on your breath. And actually the other night I had remembered one of the original, I think, breath practices I'd done when I started yoga was like, try to take 10 breaths and count each breath. And every time you lose count, start again. And I think I done it in bed actually the other night, and like, I don't think I got to 10 once. Like, you know, I was like 3, 4, mind
Mind's
wandering,
gone,
gone,
yeah.
you know, and then like, so start back at 1 as soon as I realized that. And that's like just being able to redirect your focus. And even with, like, as a father, I have 3 children. So it's when they're, like, sometimes you have to connect with them, but you connect and redirect, you know, distraction. Oh, what's that over there? Like, but it's that connecting and then redirect.
I love that. I love even the language of redirection, because that's effectively what mindfulness teaches from what I've seen and heard from you. But yoga, I think a lot of people listening, similar to me, we think physical first, mental after, just because if you're fitness, if you're into sport, you tend to be a little bit more kinesthetic anyway, where you're like, you like to move. And what yoga does, and again, this is a focus group of 1, it's the physical embodiment of mindfulness, in the sense that the examples you gave earlier, focus on your breath, focus on your fingers, focus on the energy in the soles of your feet. And what that does is it's giving you a physical representation of how it should feel for when there's mental, emotional moments in real life where you're like, okay, I need to redirect my mind now. Again, redirect my energy inwards. Don't react to this. And I think there's so much crossover, which is an indirect kind of tie-in to one of the things I want to touch on, because we said before we went on air, and I gave you a little bit of, look, we're probably going to talk about this, but I tend to do the podcast off the fly for the most part, is we talked about yoga helping with, say, body weight, losing body fat. You've talked about the Science of Yoga book, difficult yoga poses, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. Something that I want to unpack, and which I loved, and these are, I'm paraphrasing your words slightly, but the burning desire, addiction pattern, letting it burn out, that getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And although it might not physically translate into burning more calories, although it can if you're in yoga. Yoga is quite intense for anyone that's done it, different types of forms, but it's quite intense. But what it can do is it helps you to redirect your focus, which means that I'm feeling distracted, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling sad. I don't need to go for food. I need to call my friend. It allows you to redirect your energy, redirect your focus, bring more self-awareness into your body, what's going on, into the decisions that you're making, and allows you to respond. Talk to us a little bit about how yoga helps us get comfortable being uncomfortable, and how that can potentially, without going into particularly addiction, because that's everything from addictive tendencies to full-blown addiction, which we're not going to touch on. That's a whole separate conversation. But that burning desire, the pattern, and just letting it burn out when we've got potentially bad habits, or let me rephrase, unsupportive habits to the person we want to be. How important is getting comfortable being uncomfortable within the yoga setup?
Well, I think it goes back to the discrepancy monitor, that feeling of there's something lacking again. Like, and so that's when, like, if you want, I need a smoke, or, you know, there's that kind of what can feel like a burning desire. And then when I was trying to break some of the habits, I remember that sensation in my body, and I remember hearing about, like, does you let it burn out. And, you know, other people's experience might be different, but that for me, it was like kind of that seed of burning that can, you know, can be so overwhelming and drive our behavior. In a yoga pose, let's say you are I could use another warrior pose, like, you know, it can be a bit uncomfortable. It can be a bit heavy on the legs, that, you know, your body might be screaming at you, and being able to reconnect with your breath, or bring the sensations of your breath front and center, it can allow us to, you know, just we're more equipped with it. So there's a test you can do with, like, an ice cube. So if you get an ice cube and you put it into you make a fist around the ice cube, and what most people do straight away, just go, oh jeez, and they kind of, it's just so overwhelmed, they let go. And you go, okay, this time I want you to focus on your breath. And then you hold it, and you kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I can tolerate this a little bit longer. Okay, yeah, this is a bit more comfortable, and you just keep breathing. So when we bring our breath into the equation, that can, like, I mean, that's probably the most transformational part of it. Even, like, if you think you can do it just now if you want, like, make a closed fist and squeeze it. Now, what's happening to your breath?
Stopping.
Yeah, and I can see your facial muscles are like, they're going.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit scared now.
Yeah. Full-blown boxes actually now, like, two was flaking the shit out of each other.
Right. But try to breathe. Now just breathe into that. And, like, now what does your hand want to do?
It's
when you start breathing?
Mine is softening.
Yeah, so it's beginning to open. It's beginning to open up and let go. And like we can do that with any kind of tension or tightness in our body. So once you become aware of it, you kind of go, oh, there's that tension again in my shoulders. Or maybe I need to take a break from the desk here. Maybe, once you become aware of it, then you can respond a bit more skillfully than, waiting till your shoulders are in bits, like, and you're there hours later and decades later for some people. And, you can see how people hold the energy in their body. Like, you can see how they walk. You can see it in their posture, see it in their facial muscles. It's quite evident, how people are holding on to a lot of these. Even how we speak. So you start becoming more careful in, like, the words you use, how you interact with people. When people, maybe sometimes when they start speaking to us, instead of going, I'm waiting for this person to finish so I can say what I want to say, we're actually, like, we're actively listening and we're engaged with them, and that can obviously have great benefits for our relationships as well.
Definitely can. That's something I think I'm very lucky in the sense of the podcast, because active listening is something that you have to do on the podcast when you're having the conversation. So I always listen back to my episodes, because you completely get a different, you're now passively listening. You're listening to purely what you're saying. It's a different thing to a conversation, and you're picking up nuggets of gold. That's why I always recommend to people with audiobooks or podcasts, the ones that connect, save them, come back to them again, because, it's the old cliche of, I think it's Marcus Aurelius, the same man or woman never steps into the same river twice. Your life's at a different stage. So you end up picking it up because you're listening for different cues based on where your life is at now. Some people will listen and go, oh my God, mindfulness, that's exactly what I need to improve here, here, and here. Someone else will listen and go, oh, it's the yoga, there's tightness here and there's blocks in my body, I need to do this. And then they'll listen in 6 months' time and it'll be something completely different that resonates and connects. The final thing I want to touch on,
if I can give one little bit of advice. So we all have, like, ways into being mindful or being present. So for me, my breath is very, like, that's my main practice. But for other people, it might be their hands, it might be their facial muscles, it might be their bum on the seat, or it might be their feet on the ground. And I just remember this the other day when I was making that last Instagram post. When I came back from India the first time I went in, I was doing the H-dip in Trinity. And I remember the lecturers talking, and I was able to sit there, and I was able to, like, I was getting what they were saying nearly the whole time, like, and I was just sitting there breathing, focusing on my breath while listening, and it really anchored me into that present moment. And I was just absorbed more. My marks were higher, but when I was going in for my degree, I was like, I would have been hungover a bit more, or I would have been kind of a bit more uncomfortable and jittery and not as comfortable in my own skin, in a sense. So finding your own anchor, experimenting with them, and then being able to recall that anchor. So I know some people might have a little yellow sticker or something on their desk, or something that reminds them to connect with their breath regularly, have a chime on your phone, or, just something that's an external reminder for what you need to internally check in with. I love that. That's really, really good. Completely different. I don't know if I haven't done this with you yet, but sales calls, I've got a couple of my mentees with sales calls being like, let them speak. I'm like, put it on a post-it note and put it on your laptop and let people speak, because on sales calls or calls where you're trying to see if you're a fit for somebody, people have a proclivity to speak way too much and not let the other person go through their pain points, go through what they're struggling with. And again, that's a very tactical business tool, but when you're looking for this compound effect of the way you're showing up in the world in general, breathing and learning to breathe and sit with it, again, can be a beautiful reminder. So I love that tactical tool. The last thing I want to ask, which ties in really well to what you're offering for people, and we've been kind of bouncing back and forth on this in terms of, like, positioning the business, because prevention and cure are such difficult things to maneuver, because in fitness, in mindfulness, in yoga, in health, in wellness, most of us are selling cure, but we want to be selling prevention, because people are in pain, they're overweight, their mind is racing, they've got anxiety, they're not happy with their body composition, they've got health issues. They're at the point where the tipping point has pushed them into, I'm in pain now. And something that we're always trying to counterbalance against, me, you, everybody that's trying to serve people in a meaningful way, is how do we not get them to that point?
So what we try and do with the bridge, I do this with my content, we're doing this with yours, is drawing out the line of, look, here's how you prevent the overwhelm. Here's how you prevent the negative issues happening. Here's how you do the mindfulness. Here's how you do the breathing. Here's how you do the yoga. But if you are in the point of cure, you can work with me. Here's the layout for those that want to work with you online, etc. Everything that will be linked in the description below. But when it comes to prevention versus cure, particularly within the mindfulness and yoga space, how important, this is going to sound like an obvious question, but I'm curious to hear your direct feedback on this, because you got my perspective when we were checking in last week, and I said, all right, don't come back to me because I want to ask you this on the podcast, or we'll come back to this on the podcast. How important is the prevention model? But then for those that life has just happened, something has happened that just tipped them over. They stress at college, break up a relationship, or even a new relationship and trying to balance it, having kids, adding in a new training regimen, things that can stress the body, stress you emotionally, stress you mentally. How important is it to be okay that you've moved into cure phase where you need or potentially need a Ciaran to help you get out of it so that you can go back to the prevention and not have to use that over and over again? Talk us a little bit through the mindfulness and yoga element of prevention. And then if someone does tip over that they need cure and actually need somebody, that you're trying to get them back into the prevention mode again, because I know this is a big part of your work.
With yoga, it's easier probably to bounce in and out of classes. So my wife was doing a month unlimited yoga session this month, unlimited sessions with the local studio. And that's going to, in a way, that's going to be, she's like preventing maybe a bit more burnout come February and March. With mindfulness, it tends to be, it's not as accessible in one way for people to drop into classes and be guided through it. And the main mindfulness courses that are offered it's the 8-week Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction course, the MBSR, and that's the gold standard. But it's 2.5 hours a week with up to like 30, 40 minutes practice a day. So it's a big commitment. And what I've noticed over the years, that people who go to these, they're either want to be mindfulness teachers, or they might want to teach it in school or whatever, or they're kind of, they're at that point of kind of being overwhelmed. And, and this is probably where I'm trying to, when I'm offering a service, sometimes it's a little bit frustrating that people wait to that point where there is an intervention required. But if we could, and being able to carve mindfulness and yoga into your everyday. So that's why I think in workplaces and school educational environments that we do offer these services, and that they're there and they're accessible and that people can engage with them. Like that's great. Like with Western society, Western medicine, it's super at like keeping people alive and healing them. But
surviving, not thriving.
Terrible at intervention.
Not to disregard Western medicine. I'm very glad I'm in the Western world. If I have a car crash tomorrow, that I'm going into a hospital and it's not someone with the Reiki and sage over me trying to bring me back to life, which I'm all for in terms of like mindfulness. But if I've been in a car crash, I'm like, get me to a fucking hospital.
Right. So we're super at that. But
so continue.
Well, that's it. That's it. Being carving it into the day. And making that a habit. And that's the challenge there.
Yeah, and I think the prevention model is always going to be the best for those who are pushed into overwhelm. As a professional who's been doing this for a long time, is the goal, and I know the answer to this, but I think it's useful for people to hear it from the practitioner and the expert, is the goal to get them back to a place where they don't tip over into overwhelm again, where you're effectively, I always think of it when I would coach people in fitness, very similar to business, but particularly with fitness, where it's the old adage of teach a man or woman to fish, they will eat for a lifetime, versus give them a fish, they'll eat for a day. I would always try and give people the nutrition, the training tools, modalities, so that they didn't need me forever. Then I didn't do my job as a coach. Same as me, you in business. It's giving you the tools that will serve you for the rest of the year, 2 years now, 3 years from now, long after the mentorship program. So it's arming people with the tools. When it comes to mindfulness and yoga, is it similar in terms of, right, you've overwhelmed and you've tipped over now, let's not judge that. Let's remove the, I've done it again story or narrative. Let's look at it from curiosity. Let's try and get back into a more regulated place and then see the patterns forming again. Is that how it looks with yoga and mindfulness for those who have tipped over?
Well, mindfulness, I think, would be more equipped here. So if something happens and begin to spiral into that, like old habits where it can, for maybe someone who's in a healthier mental space, they can kind of go, all right, that's just that. And they can, as the duck, you remember shaking it off, they can do that. But maybe other people, it might trigger an ongoing spiral where mindfulness really helps us create that space. So you go, okay, well, there's that physical reaction. That person has said this to me, or this has happened, and that might be the trigger for a spiraling next few weeks of a certain feel and tone that you can't shake off. With depression, there's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. It's a spin-off from the MBSR. And now you have to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist to deliver that. Now, it's very similar to the MBSR course, but there's huge research into that in stopping reoccurring depression. Like the stats are very high on that. I don't know. I don't think there's that many people qualified with it in Ireland. There are people there, but the MBCT is that's what I would recommend to anybody who has that reoccurring depression.
Love it. Ciaran, great conversation. I think the discrepancy monitor was one of my favorite things, not having enough milk in your tea. So I'm so glad we got to unpack that. That was one that when you told me about it first and you did the reel on social, which I'll link in the description for people below, connected with me in real time in terms of like that disconnection between how we want things to be and how things are. Because I think no matter how quote unquote evolved we become as in human beings, we still have this like gap between whether it is abundance and scarcity and reality versus expectation. And it's that old cliche, I don't know who I'm attributing it to, or that quote of happiness is reality minus expectation. So it's like, how do we reduce the expectations and live in the present moment so we're not in the future, we're not in the past? For those that want to work with you, I'll link it in the description below. What I love about what you do, and this is just a call to action from my side for people, is that mindfulness and yoga, which I've used interchangeably a lot on this podcast, although they're different things, is you look at the individual and go, which one do they need more of? You'll have someone that comes to you and go, well, actually, the physical body is the issue here. Let's do more of this and bring the mindfulness with it. Or the flip, the mindfulness is the issue and the yoga is the secondary mover. And you also will offer it through Irish if people want that. Yeah, so again, a beautiful thing that's in addition. Anything you want to wrap us on, I'll link all that in the description for people below, but anything you want to wrap the podcast on?
So, some people like that, they might have a lot of yoga experience, but they want to develop the mindfulness aspect. But then for some people, they might not be as experienced with yoga. And for a lot of people, the doorway in, so I ran the MBSR course for men. So we had 15 men. It was actually really enjoyable. It was a great 8 weeks. A lot of them, because they were shy to go in, they weren't comfortable going into yoga settings because it was mostly women. Now, I wouldn't even notice, to be honest, like when I'm in there, but for them, it was like they were kind of, they felt that they were being perceived as being a bit pervy or something being there. But when I done the yoga with them, like that was like around like from week 3-4, like they really start getting into it. And that was that doorway in for them, the physical sensation. So it's harder to sit with the thoughts. It's hard, but when your mind has something to focus on, the sensations, it can be a great way in. So if people have struggled with mindfulness in the past, then using mindful movement or yoga as a pathway in.
Love it. And I'm also, which I haven't mentioned, or I have, but very briefly, the books, the children books, Ask Yoga, the yoga poses, and also for any teachers or principals, head teachers. You do a lot with schools. That will all be linked below through the website. People can reach out on social media. So it's not just the coaching. There's a lot of string to your bows in terms of offers. They will all be in the description below. Ciaran, keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much again. That was Ciaran from Oga Yoga, learning to listen to your body, the mindfulness inquiry process, and using yoga to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Today's show was sponsored by my business mentorship program. As I mentioned in the introduction, at the time of recording, it's currently full and there is a waiting list, but the application form and the details are in the link in the description below. Hopefully you got loads from today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next week.